Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We start our last presidency press conference after the informal ECOFIN. And today we had two quite insightful discussions. The first part of the working session was about future shape of the financial system. And the second part was devoted to fight against tax fraud and tax evasion. I will start perhaps with the first part because unfortunately Michel Barnier isn't present, but Vitor Constancio could add if I missed something. The discussion was directed towards further perspective. What action and what line should we take for financial system in Europe to be more resilient to crises? Of course, banking union is one part of the work, but since we had a discussion, quite exhaustive discussion yesterday about banking union issues, this was not the main part of our discussion. The main conclusion of the discussion was that the issue of financial markets, future shape of financial markets is too wide-ranging, and obviously it is not limited to the repair of banking system alone, but also should involve restructuring, building, expanding capital markets. This is the issue that differs us, say, from the United States, where capital markets indeed have a very great importance for crediting businesses, and banking sector is in that respect narrower. In Europe, our businesses are still very dependent on the banking sector, on the banking credit. So that is why banking sector in Europe is of such crucial importance when we talk about legal regulation. But we must ensure that capital markets also expand, that capital markets are available for businesses, and especially for small and medium enterprises. This was also part of discussion of yesterday's working session. Really there is much to be done. At our session we had also input from Sharon Bowles. She is the head of the Econ Committee at the European Parliament. So I think this was a very good interaction. Informal ECOFINs are always such a complex event where not only ministers but also central bank governors are present. But here this connection with the European Parliament, I think it was also an important issue because we need good cooperation with the European Parliament. We, the presidency, we understand that European Parliament, it is a very important legislative body that represents our citizens, European citizens. So in all our activities, we must pay attention to the possible further way of our legal acts in the European Parliament. Another aspect that was very carefully discussed is market fragmentation, which in the case of financial markets is really the most important issue. We have fragmented not only banking sector but also financial markets across the European Union, the capital markets across the European Union. So we should think how to decrease this fragmentation. One of the ideas that are not still on the table as legislative proposals were put forward, and I think they will be discussed further. These are general or unified corporate governance standards, and perhaps we must start talking about unified insolvency requirements across the European Union. Because these issues, they just determine fragmentation. I think my views could be continued first by Vitor Constancio, and then about taxation issues, I will ask Algirdas Šemeta, Commissioner Algirdas Šemeta, to summarize the discussion. Vitor, please.
Thank you, Minister. Well, I have very little to add to what you described. Was indeed the discussion. The European financial system, since the crisis, has changed quite a lot, because indeed there has been a lot of deleveraging of the banking sector in particular, and some increase also in the importance of the bond market to finance big firms. And at the same time, we have seen changes in business plans of the banks, and there is the big problem of fragmentation, in particular in the banking industry, because the crisis has determined this fragmentation that goes even beyond the connection between banks and sovereigns and the sovereign debt problem, because it has also to do with the fragmentation in the real economy, in different rates of growth in different parts of Europe. And that affects also the assessment of banks in what regards lending to other banks in countries under stress. And so it's an overall problem that has to be solved when indeed the growth in Europe picks up in a more homogeneous way. The other point, the other important point, I will add a comment, has to do with the need for more integration of capital markets, including the equity market. And there, nevertheless, the problem is then more complex, because some of the reasons why capital markets and equity markets are not more integrated right now have to do with different legislation regarding corporate law, regarding bankruptcy laws, regarding taxation. And all these important elements that would foster integration, many of those stay outside the scope of the treaty, because member states keep important national autonomy in all these subjects, in spite of some progress in some harmonization, but there is indeed no scope to impose this harmonization. So there the problem is, of course, more acute and should be more deeper considered by the states that are members of the Euro, of monetary union, because in order to reap all the benefits of having a monetary union in a single currency, the integration of capital markets would be a great help, and they should think on their own to try to harmonize more these 3 points that would contribute very much to the increase in size and depth and efficiency of capital markets. Thank you.
Now, Algirdas Šemeta, the Commissioner.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Just over a week ago, the G20 leaders committed to making the automatic exchange of information the global standard in taxation. This is a major breakthrough, one that would have been inconceivable even 5 years ago. The EU has been championing the automatic exchange of information for years now as one of the best tools for combating tax evasion. Our global partners are finally ready to follow our lead. With this ambitious goal accomplished, today was a very useful opportunity for us to take stock and look ahead as a union. The progress that has been achieved this year in the fight against tax evasion is a testament to what can be done when member states all work in the same direction. In the area of automatic information exchange, we have the experience, the expertise, and the collective weight to considerably influence the international environment. Therefore, we must continue to work together to exert this influence. With the principle of global automatic exchange now firmly established, its implementation is the next challenge. We must ensure that as the new global standard is developed, it complements the EU approach. It must be cost-effective, compliant with our data protection legislation, and reciprocal. We should push for an early adoption of the new global norm in line with our work in this area at EU level. Mr. Guria's participation in today's session was very welcome. The EU has worked very closely with the OECD for greater tax good governance worldwide. I am confident that this collaboration will continue with the same level of mutual respect as we progress from here. Meanwhile, amongst ourselves, we must maintain a high level of ambition. The EU can keep its position as global frontrunner in the field of information exchange with the revised Savings Directive and the Administrative Cooperation Directive, which I proposed earlier this year. At the summit in May, our leaders committed to backing the widest possible exchange of information within the EU. So we should expect to see important movement in this direction, including the adoption of the Savings Directive before the end of the Lithuanian presidency. Before I conclude, allow me to say just a few words on the financial transaction tax. While this was not discussed at today's ECOFIN, it has been the subject of much speculation over the past few days. So this is a good opportunity to set the record straight. The Commission is absolutely confident in the legality of the financial transaction tax we have proposed. We reject any claim that it goes against the treaties or that it compromises the single market. Nonetheless, I fully appreciate the need for our member states to be assured of this legal certainty when negotiating such an important proposal. Therefore, we stand ready to answer any questions they may have and will continue to provide any clarifications needed to facilitate swift progress towards a successful compromise on the FTT. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Time for questions. Please identify yourself and please state who you are addressing a question to. Suzanne.
Hi, Suzanne Lynch from the Irish Times. This is a question for the Commissioner. When you say that today automatic exchange of information was discussed, was this just in terms of information about individual tax systems, tax arrangements, or did you talk about individual countries and the obligation to exchange information about tax?
Well, the subject of today's discussion was automatic exchange of information about individuals. But the topic was touched a little bit broader, and some participants of the discussion also addressed the work on base erosion and profit shifting, but it was more general discussion. The main target was to discuss the way ahead at the EU level in terms of the progress of automatic exchange of information, taking into account that the global standard has been agreed by heads of states of G20. So now we, European Union, has to maintain our leadership, and for this we needed to discuss how we will do that.
Etoiria from Le Temps newspaper from Geneva. Did you discuss, Commissioner, how you would continue to deal with third countries like Switzerland and other countries? Will the mandate, your own mandate, change because of the decision of the G20 last week?
This point was addressed during the discussion, and I myself also presented the Commission's view, how we should proceed, and I think that in the audience nobody objected to this approach. We consider that the key point here is that we should not be complacent and wait until all the details of the global standard will be adopted. We have to continue our work. It means that we have to stick to the mandate which was extended to the Commission for negotiations with neighboring countries, and the negotiations will continue, and I see also openness of our partners to negotiate also an automatic exchange of information, which was almost unimaginable a few years ago. And also, I think this is a reflection of the global development, which I just mentioned when answered previous question.
Jim.
Jim Brunston from Bloomberg News. Well, a question mainly for the Commissioner. Commissioner Šemeta, I understood your comments on the transaction tax, but haven't you still got a problem here in that with the court's opinion, it's now clearer that basically this is being built in legislative terms on quite shaky foundations, and that something is being discussed which could, subsequently be ruled illegal, and there's already, at least one EU member state that's legally challenging this. So isn't there a problem for you that you need to decide maybe whether or not to take a period to just sit back and reflect on this, because otherwise you risk doing something which is then just going to be instantly annulled? And also for Vice President Constancio, is it possible to have the ECB's take on the transaction tax? I mean, is this something you see in positive terms, or could it weigh on growth in the euro area? Thank you very much.
Well, I will start. Well, first of all, I would like to correct you. It's not the court's decision. It's the actually opinion of the Council Legal Service. And yes, we have the case in the court, which was made by United Kingdom. But here I have to be very clear. The UK case is on completely different subject. It's about the enhanced cooperation procedure as such, and it has nothing to do with the opinion of the legal service of the Council, and here we should not make any links. So then I have to stress that I think that it was sort of misunderstanding in the interpretation of the opinion of the Council Legal Service, because what they commented is one paragraph in the entire proposal. And as I said in my introduction, we are confident that the Commission's arguments and arguments of the legal service of the Commission, they will demonstrate very clearly to our member states that the approach which has been taken in the proposal is the correct one and doesn't breach any provisions of the treaty. And I have to say just that at the beginning of this week, we had a meeting of the Council Working Group where the FTT was discussed, and our member states, they concluded the first reading of the proposal. And I believe that we will present all necessary arguments to our member states for the next meeting of the Council Working Group. So the work is in progress, and I do not see any reasons to stop this work or to make sort of additional reflections.
Thank you. Well, taxation matters are not within the remit or competences of the ECB. So there is no opinion of the ECB about the financial transaction tax, and there will not be one. There will be no opinion on the FTT. That's very clear. We just voiced that in view of our knowledge, in particular of the way markets in the short end of maturities, say up to 1 year, we offered our knowledge to enlighten governments, the Commission. We have dialogued about the consequences of the tax on the working of monetary markets, and no more. And so I have nothing to add to what has been our communication about the FTT. Thank you.
On? There we are. Thanks very much. From MLEX, John Riga. First, actually, a question for the Commissioner. If you could just clarify to whom you'll be making your legal case, because in the Council Working Group, I believe all the member states are there, but this is a proposal under enhanced cooperation where only the member states who participate ultimately decide. And as we saw in the Council Legal Service opinion, the potential conflict is primarily about the member states who are not deciding the enhanced FTT. And the other question, I guess this would be for the Minister and the Vice President, is in discussion of the future of the banking union, is there any discussion about coming back to having a shared deposit guarantee, or can we say that this is an idea that, that is dead effectively? Thanks.
Well, you rightly pointed out that we are in the procedure of enhanced cooperation, and the beauty of this procedure is that despite the fact that only 11 member states decided to go ahead with the FTT, but all 28 they participate in negotiations, in the discussions, and just the decision making is on the part of participating member states. So the Council Working Group is the right formation to present arguments of the Commission's legal service, and I have to say that normally we do not produce opinions on opinions. The intention of our legal service is to produce the staff working document where they will present all the necessary arguments backing the Commission's proposal. On this particular subject, I want to stress once again that here we are talking about one specific element of the proposal and not about the proposal as a whole.
Now turning to the deposit guarantee scheme, of course, this directive was discussed, came to trilogues quite a long time ago, and it stalled in mid-2012, I think, when the work started upon other issues concerning banking sector. Now, as we have BRRD already agreed politically in the Council and put on the table for trilogues with European Parliament and the Commission, we also resumed work on DGS. So the idea that you mentioned is not thrown away. But of course, I must admit that DGS is highly dependent on what progress is made and what structure will remain after trilogues concerning BRRD. So Bank Resolution Fund and Deposit Guarantee Fund, whether they will be two separate or will be united, this is a question of further discussions. So it is being discussed, BRRD first and DGS after that.
Well, if I may add something going beyond this directive that is being prepared, discussed, which is about harmonization of national schemes of deposit guarantee, which is important because this harmonization will enhance the role of deposit guarantee schemes across the Union, including then the Euro area countries. But beyond that, the possibility of a true European deposit guarantee scheme is for us certainly an element of a future banking union that would be completed. But there is the understanding that this component will come at a later stage, and we have accepted and understood ourselves that this is acceptable. It is not vital for the first stages of the banking union that this component would be also on the table. It can wait, and so it will wait, but I will say that it is not that, certainly going forward. Thank you.
Alex.
Alex Barker, Financial Times. It's a question for Mr. Constancio. You were very clear about your desired shape for the SRM yesterday. Is the progress, both in terms of the ambition of the reform and the timing of the reform, an important factor for the ECB in deciding when to start the SSM, or is that an independent decision?
Well, it has to be independent as a result of the legislation. The regulation that was voted in Parliament and will be finally voted by the Council in a short while imposes on the ECB, using the Article 236 of the 237 of the treaty, that we will start operating the SSM, the supervisory mechanism, 1 year after the publication of the regulation. So we have to do it, and we will do it, of course. So we have been preparing intensively for that role. A lot of work has already been done in technical preparations of documents, guidelines, manuals, and all that. And so we will do it regardless of what will happen to the resolution mechanism. What we have said very clearly is that any supervisor, and us as European supervisors, wants to have available a resolution mechanism when a bank has to be delivered for resolution. And what is at stake here is mostly the possible resolution of cross-border banks, which, if they are done in a national context, have proved to be more difficult in the past few years. There are very many examples. So we do want a European resolution mechanism to be put in place to accompany the first leg of the banking union. But also we recognize it has not to be there from the very first day we start to supervise. We are not anticipating that, we are going to have a resolution of banks, let alone cross-border banks in Europe. So it's something that we see as absolutely necessary in the concepts I mentioned yesterday with those 3 features I enumerated, but it's really not linked to us starting to start the SSM. Thank you.
Any more questions? No? So thank you, Minister. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Vice President. Thank you all.
Thank you.